So we're live for this afternoon's webinar on successfully tackling tenders. We've got Keith Whelan with us again, and those of you that were on last week, you'll know what the format will be. I'll be dragging a few slides and Keith will be sharing his insights with you. And so I know everyone's busy and we've got a lot to get through. So what I'll do is, Keith, I'll just get this on full screen and over to you.
Thank you, Barry, and good afternoon all to everyone again. Thanks for logging in to this tender writing webinar in conjunction with the Grand Sky and the Irish Australian Chamber of Commerce. It's great to be here again talking about tenders, which is just as apt as talking about grants. Obviously, we've seen a number of stimulus package again released during the week by state and federal governments, but tenders, they're still alive and well, they're still out there. And I looked this morning at AusTender, which is tenders.gov.au, which is really the website you need to look at from a federal level, and certainly look at your state government resources as well and local government. But tenders.gov.au, there was tenders closing today for government contracts, closing on Monday. So they are getting oversubscribed with a lot of queries, obviously, regarding the situation, because a lot of government tenders are being released at the moment as stimulus for what's out there for businesses to get them up and going again. Tenders@finance.gov.au is the email if you have any queries that you want to talk to them about. So tenders@finance.gov.au, and the website again is AusTender, which is tenders.gov.au, again, federal government. But just to give you a brief overview, when I looked at it this morning again, we had the Department of Health, the Department of Education, the Department of Defence, Department of Finance, Department of Veteran Affairs, and the Department of Digital Transformation, all handing out government contracts and government tenders, basically quite wide and varied. Some were for management support services, some were for laboratory and scientific equipment, some were for project management and heritage listed buildings, some were for building construction and support and maintenance repair services, and some were for software. So it's quite varied, and I think you really need to spend time and effort looking at that website and the equivalent local and state government websites talking about tender writing and talking about the tenders and the contracts that are being released to you. So let's kick it off. Let's go down to the first slide and talking about the 4 Ps, as you're well versed in all business: place, product, promo, price, basically in your target, looking at basically encompassing all in your narrative for your tender, basically. So who are you? What do you do? Where do you do it? How do you do it? Things I've talked about last week in grants, which are applicable to tenders. Grants and tenders very much first cousins of each other. A lot of what business processes you're going to put into tenders can be replicated in grants and vice versa. So think about what you have before you even apply for a tender, and think about your eligibility then at the end of the day. So think about all those things like we talked about last week: your business plan, your business case, your capex, all of those things before you actually write a tender again. And even are you eligible and suitable, basically, because it's quite demanding a tender basically in terms of eligibility and requirements. So you need some lead-in time to do that. Let's go on to the next slide. So your unique selling point, quintessentially, obviously tenders is about price, cost, value for money. So what's your unique selling point on top of the price? So you need to look at your own price. You need to look at doing a competitor analysis to what price is out there in the industry sector that you're operating within, and your own unique selling point. What's the quintessential point of difference that you have over your industry competitors, and how you're a market leader? And you need to sell that. Again, like I talked about last week with grants, tenders is very much the same. It's a glorified sales pitch. I need you to sell how good you are, runs on the board, contracts that have been serviced on time and on budget. Okay, you need to sell. So again, as a business, you need to go back and think about accumulating that data, accumulating those business case studies, and showing me that in your tender application. Moving on. So they factor in a number of things. Obviously, again, we'll never get away from price, but at the same time, I'm looking for a number of different components that you tick the box per se, basically, with government grants at local, state, and federal. So that could be, as an indicative, diversity, inclusion, benefits to the Australian economy, the knock-on effect, training, upskilling, employment, particularly now in the COVID-19 scenario. But it could be Indigenous participation, so Indigenous members of staff coming on board, diversity measures, basically, how you have business planning and different ways of doing best practice, economic benefit, knock-on benefit to the society, knock-on benefit to the business sector and to the economy. The personnel, the extent to which basically you have suitable people with suitable experience and capability to deliver. They're now asking for bios, as we talked about last week as well in grants, the caliber of staff that are going to be running the project management on this tender. So make sure you get them aligned as well. The right people are going to be there, not just one person, but that core team, 4 or 5 people that are apt, that are going to run the project management of that, including delivery, finance, logistics, all those components. Moving on. So an organizational structure plan is requested a lot of the time, outlines positions of those that are going to be involved in the process and how they're going to deliver it and how they're going to report and evaluate on it. So a lot of the time, and you can find a template for organizational structural plans on the web. So again, create one indigenous to your own business. A resourcing schedule that shows the allocation of those resources, who's doing what, where, and when. And that could be anything as well, including of terms of reference, signed and dated CVs of up to 3 pages and 2 written references as well. Make sure you get your referees in order. Optimally 2, I'd say 3 or 4 would be even better, basically, of people you conducted services for, contracts for, delivered for, and particularly if you're applying to government, other government agencies and departments, that'll be fantastic. Okay, moving on. Technical approach. How you build critical relationships to deliver services, basically. The skills, the expertise, your cutting edge, you're a leading market player in what you're doing, basically. Again, sell that back to me. Show me the advantage you have of going with you. So I may be enticed or enthused already by your price, but show me the value add on top of that as well. And technical approach and technical understanding of the project, which you must sell back to me in your tender pitch, is integral to that as well. Shifting resources to new priorities or analysis, basically, how you have the flexibility of movement to move the goalposts as the project is undertaken and as the project evolves. How you will balance short-term results with more transformative and long-term results. That's about evaluation again, monitoring, appraisal, basically. Dealing with the fluctualities of what's going to happen, the fluctuations that are going to happen in the scenario, how you have that streamlined, fluid process as an organization or a business to do that. And propose technical performance indicators for delivery of processes. Again, benchmarks, how you actually quantifying and evaluating what you're doing on time and on budget, and how you have that as a resource in your organization, like risk management, like evaluation of any undertaking you're doing as a business process. All these things I need to see. So what are we saying? We're saying you need these in advance, which means you should be doing these now rather than being reactive, which we talked about again last week. Be proactive. Talk about basically getting these things done with your team now, consolidate, look at the app tenders coming up basically out of Oz Tender, and then target them basically. Don't be reactive and just put them in for the sake of them. Get all of what I'm saying here done first, consolidate, and then apply. Okay, next. So your operational approach. What's your work plan? Simple as that. And, you know, I just need to see evidence of it. How you will attract, appoint, deploy, train key personnel. Critical political media opportunities and risks, basically how you've measured all of that up, basically how you're going to acknowledge what you're doing, how you're going to toe the line with government, basically they want as part of the contractual requirements. What systems are you using to collect, collate, and analyze data? Provision of concise and customized info. As I said last week, clear, concise, and compelling. It should be a very articulate tender bid. So clear, concise, compelling, less is more. I just need enough to answer the question and suffice that with a very good price at the same time. Okay, moving on. So how will risk and finance be managed? One of the key questions in tenders. What's your risk management plan? What's your risk management policy? How you're financing this yourself as well. Obviously, I'm giving you a contract in this. There's no artificial budget inflation. There's no blowout per se. We don't want to see that. So how are you managing that? What money are you putting up yourselves as a business to substantiate this as well? Is there alternate revenue streams coming in as well? How can you factor those blowouts if they occur? How can you plan for that? Propose key operational performance indicators, again, benchmarking and evaluation of what you're doing every step of the way. Cost-effective and competitive price. How do you determine that as an organization or as a business? And what do you come to as a result of that determination, basically, that you are not applying for a tender basically is a loss-making scenario just to get a foot in the door per se. This is about achieving profit. This is not even about breaking even. This is about basically attaining a good contract that's going to give you profitability as a business. There's no shame in making a profit in a tender. There seems to be a misconception about that sometimes basically. It's about being cost effective, yes, that if I'm equivocating against other bids, that obviously you're in comparison, you're in the same ballpark, but I need to see a competitive price as well. But competitive price is determined by a number of factors, which we'll see later on in one of the slides I'm going to talk about. Detailing of milestones and deliverables, again, I keep on reiterating it. It's again just benchmarking, basically making sure every step of the way you take 2 steps forward, you're not taking 3 steps back. That everything, you have good project management, good time management, good logistics, good resources, good skills, good people to deliver this. Payments linked to performance and program achievements, factoring that in as well, may or may not be stipulated in some government contracts. You may want to stipulate it yourself. And again, that's the mediation and mitigation factor about understanding before you actually go into the tender bid itself, which means attending the tender session, the tender webinar, in this case in time, asking the questions, the FAQs, ring them up basically, and using the helpline that's there essentially. A lot of these questions should be answered in advance rather than actually proposing terms of contract to them where they've already stipulated what terms of contracts are coming out of a government department. Okay, next. So what tenders look for? Well, anticipated subcontracting, if you're going to outsource in any way, shape or form, obviously no problem with that whatsoever, as long as you substantiate the need and you have the right people and the right organizations that you're getting in to do the job. What cost savings? Are there any cost savings without cutting around the corners? Basically legitimize cost savings as well, not to the detriment of their product or service, so be cost conscientious in that regard. The level of risk, as I said last week in the grants webinar, government are risk averse, so I need to see a good risk management plan or risk mitigation strategy. Templated design, basically if you're looking at putting together your front page and contents table, basically your working environment, how you manage products and services. So I just want to see the caliber of you as a business at the end of the day. And again, going back to what I said, it's a sales pitch. Understand that basically that you need to know how to sell yourself. And if you don't at this point in time and you've lost contracts, you need to reevaluate those contracts you've lost and why. Doesn't mean necessarily you get the feedback, but look at your own processes and procedures basically. Do you have the skill set, the resources to write an articulate tender bid? If not, do you need to get someone in to help you? Let's move on. So your tender checklist, you need to cover off on insurance, your company profile basically, so the bios of the staff, the people are going to be involved, that statement of need, that statement of intent, showing me the company profile, the caliber, all right, impact statements. So first question, yeah, you always answer in every tender app bid or even grant bid. The first 20 words are integral, yeah? So basically that impact statement is very, very important. WHS policies and procedures amongst the many policies, OHS, insurance, everything else. Your environment management system, nothing to do necessarily with being green or the environment, but your operational management system basically, top down, bottom up. Pricing, rates and schedules, you have that to hand and it's all prepared in advance, it's all ticked off on. Evidence of marketplace knowledge. Now, this is where a lot of people let themselves down. They talk about themselves all the time, but they don't talk about themselves in terms of the context of knowledge of the sector, whether it be construction or pharmaceutical or provision of services, whatever the case may be. So you need to talk about your skill set knowledge in relation to the marketplace knowledge and how you are a market leader, and show that point to me, which is that point of difference again that I talked about earlier on. And references, as I said, get those referees, optimally 2 to 4 people who think you're fantastic and then delivered on time and on budget, on contract, and again, preferably government departments or agencies, that'd be great. Okay, next. So the whole of life costs of the project, basically make sure you factor all of those things in and those components, not just for stages of the project as well, basically. Your local business capability, and I use the word local there, so that's local to your state. Even if you're a national entity, local to the country, basically show me the wide demographic and geographic that you've operated on, the successful delivery of projects across states and territories, or even locally, basically, within the Sydney metro area or Melbourne metro or Brisbane CBD area. The technical merits of the product and service, again, the value adds. The contractual and technical compliance, you've ticked that box in terms of your application. Risk factors that may affect again. So I'm constantly going back to this because why? People are letting themselves down continually by not having that risk matrix, or have done one internally for their organization about identifying perceivable problems that are going to happen down the line and how they're managing them and how they're going to eradicate them. And your capacity supplier to deal with all these mitigating circumstances and things that may come up as part of this tender contract. The foresight, the plan, and the initiative to get it done, basically, because I want tried and trusted as a government entity. I want a company that's able to deliver on time and on budget. Next. Non-tender factors, things that are perceivably incidental but still very relevant at the end of the day. So fitness for purpose, your technical and financial capacity, your supplier capability, your sustainability, your risk exposure, availability of maintenance support and services, compliance with specs, and ease of inspection and delivery. For me, this is kind of a mini abbreviated short list that you need to tick all the boxes on. So if you're applying for a tender, you need to be ticking these boxes before you even proceed. Make sure you are up to date and real about all of these things, basically. Otherwise, you're going in with a haphazard approach, and it's going to do detrimental to your tender bid. Okay, moving on. So your capability statement, your mission statement of who you are and what you do and how you're a market leader, industry leader. The key people involved in that may include bios or otherwise. The equipment you use, the standard, the quality, top end, the point of difference. Look, it's quintessential for every business to determine what their unique selling point is or the point of difference and how you can distinguish that you are a market leader. And that's what you need to go back to a lot of the time, basically, in a tender. You need to reiterate that in many different ways, shapes and forms. In some ways, that's through price and your budget, but other ways, it's through what we've been talking about before already. Your certification is very important for government, obviously, that you have your benchmarks, your quality management all ticked off on. And what do you do for your customers and what benefits do you provide? So again, back to your case studies, your industry case studies showing indicatively testimonials of people of projects and services that you've provided in the past through tenders. Okay, moving on. So who are your major clients and what type of work have you successfully completed? Were the projects completed on time, within budget, and demonstrate how you met those benchmarks? So again, go back and use these as templates, starting points before you even put in your tender application. Think about consolidating again, because you can use these multiple times again and again in different shapes and forms. Not copy and paste, but again, utilize rather than plagiarize, and think about what you can use as apt for each of them. So you may have to do a number of these depending on what industry sector you're in, or sectors if you're across a number. So think about consolidating now in the downtime perceivably you have and getting that team together through the webinars and work these out before you actually look at a targeted approach, while keeping one eye obviously on Oz Tender and what tenders are coming up. Okay, next. So what do they want to see as a tender panel that you tailor your proposal to this service? That may be blatantly obvious that it's not just copy and paste, or it's not a generic tender bid, but we still see them all the time. It's people just doing, I'll put in the same tender bid I did last year or years ago, basically. The only thing I have to adjust is the figures. No, you need to look at basically rejuvenating, and I mean that deliberately, rejuvenating your tender bid, basically. So general off-the-shelf plans and policies and strategies are great, but adapt them. Adapt them to be current, topical, and relevant as a market leader. An explanation of how quality management approaches within your organization will be adapted for continuous improvement. That's a key phrase for most tender bid agencies, in continuous improvement, that this evolves and grows as learnings out of the tender, basically delivery of services, basically, and that you have some suggestions along the way as well, the value add, the improvement that you're going to provide. So you're not going to just deliver the project or the service for the tender that's offering. You're actually going to put a value offering there and an incremental there, and something that you can do it more streamlined and better. And you can make that suggestion in a tender bid. If you have a better way of doing it, and particularly a better way and a more cost-effective way of doing it, please stipulate that. Please do that as well. But enter into those discussions and talk as best you can before the tender goes live, because government agents can't commit, obviously, to talk after the fact. Okay, moving on. So get your project in order, get your process in order, get your people in order, and show indicatively you have capacity versus knowledge. You've got the capacity to deliver it and the knowledge to deliver it as well, basically. So if you want to really scale it down to 4 fundamentals that you need to look at now for your tender processes as a business: project, process, people, capacity versus knowledge. Tick all 4. Okay, moving on. Get to the bottom line. Price, basically determine that obviously very early on at the end of the day. Are you even within bandwidth? Should you even be applying based on what was the previous tender awarded for, what contract, what size and nature? Is going to escalate even more in the coming years. You know, inflation's going to hit all of us every time, basically. Things are going to go up in price rather than down. Themes and key points. What's the theme of your tender? So the first theme is obviously price. The second theme is quality. And so on. You need to look at the various different themes, but I'd stick with those two as the first two: value offering, definitely, and details, data, and evidence. Like I said last week in grants, make a statement, back it up with fact at the end of the day. So provide details, data, and evidence, obviously, how you've done it in the past, to what value and for what worked, basically, and how you have industry expertise and capabilities to deliver this. Okay, moving on. So this is used a lot by tender assessors, these acronyms, FBI or CBE. So feature, benefit, interest, basically, that I can mark against or criterion against at the end of the day. What's the distinct feature, what's the distinct benefit, and the distinct interest point for awarding this contract. CBE is the same equivalent, just a different way. So the claim, the benefit, the evidence that you're providing. Why I'm giving you those today is because you need to be aware of writing your narrative around each of those. So if you're going to talk about making a claim that you're the best industry in the sector or a market leader, back it up. What benefit are you providing in not only in terms of cost, but the value add you're providing in terms of the tender itself, and evidence of such as well. As I said, case studies, testimonials, etc., etc. So you can use that as part of your tender modeling when you're applying for your tender. Okay, moving on. So getting started early, pretty obvious, but again, we see a lot of last minute tender bids, and optimally you're looking at something that could be 4 to 6 weeks as a tender open for, basically, maybe even a little bit less in some case and points, but you need to be ready ahead of time on that anyway. So there should be regular evaluations, or someone should be regularly appraising and monitoring in your business, basically, the tenders that are open. Go, no go, what are we doing basically in terms of tenders? What should be the top 10 we should be applying? What contracts do we know are coming up for renewal? How are we placing ourselves in terms of that? Know the information needed for the request for tender. So it's nearly mandatory now to attend the briefing or the webinar, basically. You're not even eligible to apply if you don't in certain tenders from government. Ask those questions, be part of the Q&A, get quantifiable answers back from government, address all selection criteria. Clearly blatantly obvious again, but we still see a litany of errors and gaps throughout tender bids or not applicable being written in. You have to address all the criteria that are there for a reason, and examples and explanation. Again, case studies and explanation of everything you're saying has validity and reason. Okay, moving on. Don't just apply on reputation, very important. It's fantastic you have a great brand, compliments to you. You've obviously worked hard to get that. But at the same time, basically, it's always the next step as well, the next evolution of your brand and what you're doing in terms of your reputation as a business moving forward. So this is a contract for months and years ahead, and it could be a multi-year contract as well. So it's not about necessarily what you've done in the past. That's just a substance and basically the grounding for who you are as a market leader, but what you're going to do in the future and how this multi-year tender is going to basically incorporate that as well. Motherhood statements, basically, no. Again, specifics sound good, generic, but you have to delve down into give me the facts and stats. If you're an expert, sometimes we see the opposite, basically, that people undersell themselves. Even the tender reviewers have said in the past, or reviewing panels, that they know they're probably one of the best caliber agencies or businesses out there, but they undersold themselves in the tender bid. So make sure you go back, edit, proofread, and make sure you are doing the selling and making sure you're backing up with substance as well. And templates, use those templates in advance, just like grants. Think about creating those templates for your business so you have a lot of the written components already done in terms of your tender, and you can extrapolate from that and populate your tender accordingly rather than starting from fresh every single time you do a tender. Okay, moving on. So analyze tender documents as part of your preparation process, basically. So go back and look at what you've done previously, the errors you made, the pluses that are already in there, and look at those past tender bids. Ideally in the past 12 to 18 months would be a good time span to look at. Developing a bid or no bid decision model matrix for your business. And again, you can find a lot of these on the web, and you can build your own indigenous one for your own business and company. And look at doing that. Again, that go, no go document is fundamental for whether you should do that. And it's probably a half hour or an hour with senior management team sitting down. Do we have enough to substantiate a tender bid? Or are we still lacking? And documenting, flow charting your business processes. I mean, you should be doing that anyway as a business, but obviously it's very important to make sure you can extrapolate from those components that you have identified in your flow chart and then populate your tender accordingly with that great valid information that you've ascertained already. Okay, moving on. So building answers to assessment criteria, that's the templates. Again, you can find a lot of generic questions on tenders across a number of tenders. And again, create that standard answer that you can adapt and utilize again and again. Preparing generic project plans to include in future tenders. Again, just create those templates in advance of your project plans, your core business operations, what you're doing again and again and again. Developing reference projects that describe what you've done similar work again. So just like the preparation of templates, the reference projects, basically. What good work have we done? What contracts have we delivered on time and time again, on time and on budget? Let's quantify and qualify those and use those to best effect as our unique selling point. And then, do you need the training? It's an obvious question, but you may actually do, and you may need to go to a tender webinar or a tender workshop, basically, or get yourself tender ready as a business, basically. Okay, moving on. So analyze future government requests for tenders and develop a response strategy. I mean, just look at what's going out there at the moment. Go back to OzTender, log on, look through the tenders, look at what they're asking, and create that tender strategy around what government are asking. Develop new material required to address requirements in each government tender. Again, as I said, don't just copy and paste, adapt as you see fit. Write your government tenders and provide drafts for your review, basically. So again, it's a stage process, as I said. So you're going to do optimally maybe 3 or even 4 drafts of a tender before you're going to put it in, basically. That's over a period of time, ideally 1 per week. So it can be evaluated by senior management team at the end of the week, and then go, no go on each of those. And carry out health checks the whole way throughout your tender and incorporate that and show that how you've done that in the past as a business and how you're continually planning to do so as a business throughout the tender, basically, that you're going to be up to speed, dot the I's, cross the T's as a business. Okay, moving on. So be realistic about your abilities. All the time we see a lot of people promising the world and delivering nothing in tenders, basically, and I think you need to be realistic about where you fit in. Now that could mean being a subcontractor instead of being the main player. That could mean signing an MOU with another business, basically, and getting auspiced, basically, to do that tender as well. Know your place in the process, and don't reach for the stars too far that you actually leave yourself behind and you're knocked out in the first round, basically, of evaluation. So be realistic about your abilities in what you can do as a business and where you fit into the contract and requirements. Rather than offer a product, offer a solution. Okay, so obviously the tenders are being put out as a contract that can't be serviced by government themselves. Talk about basically how you're best fit to align to government protocol and procedures and your best entity to do that at the end of the day, basically. So all the time we get people saying, here's what I do, here's what I do, here's what I do, which is great to a degree, but offer a solution as well, that how you're going to, here's what you do, but here's how we're going to offer the solution to the problem. And the problem being, I have to outsource this contract as a government agency, I can't do this. So you're going to talk about being cost effective and be energy efficient, and etc., and other factors as well. And low prices doesn't always win, as I said, basically, at the end of the day. And I think that's a hard thing for people to swallow in business, basically, that there's a number of other factors that they factor in terms of price. And it's the most enticing thing. It'll definitely get you in there amongst the herd, per se, in terms of being relevant enough that you have an optimum price. But when they read the rest of the tender, it doesn't match up against the price. So be wary of that. Okay, moving on. So a response to a tender or bid is not supposed to say what you can do, but how you can do it. Okay, there's a quintessential difference there, and this is one of my favorite sayings in tender bids. So it's not to say what you can do, but how you can do it, basically. So not just giving out that we are the best business, blah, 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 but how, what processes, procedures, policies, and people you have as an industry expert and market leader to do this. So like we've said in all the previous slides, quantify and qualify what you have and get ready to sell it, basically. Not to say what you can do, but how you do it. I'm really interested. You have a streamlined process, you have a fluidity of approach. That's what I'm looking for in a business, basically. It's not just to say you can do it, but how you can do it. Okay, moving on. So total quality management is huge for government, and it should be huge for business anyway. And a lot of businesses I work with have this process all the time and use it quite adherently. It's about management, it's about quality, and for me, it's about breaking it down to that everything you do in your business is plan, act, do, check. So again, ticking the boxes on risk management, ticking the boxes on removing the wolf from the door, per se, and looking at processes and procedures that are going to add value to your business, get your business moving forward all the time, basically, and everything you do is benchmarked Everything you do is looked at process and procedures that are going to enhance your business, not going to be an impediment for your business. Okay, so think about 2QM and have a strategy around TQM in your organization anyway. It's separate to tenders. You should have it anyway, basically, but it's a lot of the time, certainly tendering bodies are expecting you to extrapolate from TQM processes into a tender bid. So nearly a compliance factor there is that you have a TQM process. Okay, moving on. So unique selling point versus competition. So your proven previous track record and business profile, and some optimum questions here I've listed that you need to answer as a business before you actually go ahead and complete your tender. Have you delivered this type of contract before? Have you got a proven track record of successful delivery? Can this be backed up with robust references from previous delivery? Okay, so remember, I can look at all facets of you as well. So it's not just what's in the tender. I may go off and look at your LinkedIn, I may go off your company, I may go off and look at your social media component, all these different things basically. So I need to see a consistent narrative, and I need to see a lot of satisfied customers basically. Again, particularly if you're going to apply for that sector, people from that sector. Okay, moving on. Processes and standards. Again, it's a constant reiteration point, but I'm only reiterating again and again because we're not seeing enough of it as tender assessors, and I didn't in the past anyway, basically. Again, that people didn't tick the box or include the information required, or basically put in the attachments or upload the documents necessary to prove that they have the process and standards as required, basically ISO 9001, etc., basically, because you need to answer these questions. These are quintessentially tender questions. It's just I've phrased them in a different way, whereby you're looking at these as internal questions before you translate them into answering them in your tender bid, basically. But again, extrapolate these questions, go through this as part of your go, no-go process as an organization and as a business, and answer these questions, because the answers here will be the answers that you're going to put into your tender a lot of the time as well. So use these appropriately, okay? Moving on. So the wow factor, and that's through specialism, expertise, and ability to innovate. And use all three accordingly. I need the wow factor. I need to be impressed. And obviously, I could be impressed by your budget total or your bid, but at the same time, I need to be impressed by your business and what's your area of expertise, what's your area of specialism, basically, how well you've done that over the years, basically, and your consistent approach in doing that all the time as well, and your ability to innovate. I mean, a good company's one is always recycling and looking at version 2.0, what they're doing basically, and where they're going to be next year. So show me that roadmap to innovation that's consistent in your organization. So again, specialism, expertise, innovation, could be 3 subheadings you work on as an internal document, quantifying answers to that and extrapolating from that before you actually put into the tender itself. So think about that. Moving on. So does the opportunity fit with your organization business plans or strategy plans? It's a funny question to ask really in terms of a tender, isn't it? Most people want to apply for a tender because obviously it's a revenue stream for their business, but really does it fit in? And this is becoming an optimum question in a lot of tenders as well. Where does this fit into your business operations in attaining this bid or attaining this contract, should I say? And where does it fit into what your business plan stipulating that you want to grow in this sector, you want to optimize in this sector, you want to branch into this sector? You must vindicate and validate that in your answer. So if it's not there in your business plan, as in you're just going for it because you're reactive, well, it's hard to convince a tender assessment panel then basically that you have a prime entity in this place to achieve this tender. So make sure that you're thinking about it as we are going for this tender deliberately because it's in our area of operations and where we want to go as a business in the next 3 to 5 years and go into this sector or develop into this sector further basically. Can you afford the tender? Can you afford to actually win the contract? So the upfront costs, the cost of potentially putting together a tender bid, that's not just in cost of getting an outside consultant in, but the cost in time, the time it's going to put together for your tender bid team. And I recommend that you create a tender bid team in your organization, optimally 3 or 4 people. It's too much for one person to write a whole tender. So again, you have senior management, someone from finance, potentially someone from marketing and comms, and the project manager, obviously, that's going to be there delivering on that tender as well. So think about creating that tender bid team. But can you afford the tender, the costs and times and resources that's going to take you to put that tender bid together? And then what actually happens if you win? Can you actually deliver on that contract? And what may have happened in the months and potentially a year between what you've bid, your bid submittal has gone in and the time you actually start in the project and be shovel ready per se, a lot of things may have changed and it may have actually been blowouts or financial fluctuations. You need to think about things like that basically before you put in the tender bid as well. Okay, moving on. So this is a great quote from a procurement officer I was talking to a number of years ago, and it's always stuck with me basically. And he said, I knew the tenderer could do the work, but they did not include the statements of capability in their tender. Again, how good they are at what they do and how they do it. It was frustrating, but I'm obliged to only consider the information provided in the tender, so they were unsuccessful. So here we have a procurement officer who probably knew the entity to a certain degree, or knew of the entity, of the brand and the quality of what they've done, but they haven't sold up to the competency rate that it's known industry-wide, and they haven't done that. So you need to think about that where you are basically, the work you do before your tender, how you get out there and have a narrative and business storytelling about being a market leader and the contracts you're fulfilling and what you're doing, whether it be through stories or pictures, but at the same time, basically make sure you put in that value add sell in your tender bid. Okay, moving on. So credibility. Branding is important, name, experience. It will go so far, as I said in one of the previous slides, that will get you to the door, potentially even get you in the door in certain case and points. But you need to back it up again at the same time, which is that historical evidence that you have done that continually. And more importantly, you will continually do that, and you'll be innovative in doing that and sustainable in doing that moving forward as a business as well, that you've adapted and learned, even perceivably from mistakes, and that you have that approach as an organization and you're quality assured to be able to invest into you in terms of awarding you a government contract. Okay, moving on. So value for money. Everything I've highlighted there in italics and bold is what we quantify as value for money. So it's just not just the price. There's a misconception just about price, number of other factors. So it doesn't mean necessarily you have to adhere to all of these in every specific tender, but the vast majority of them exist. So you have to look at the quality of service, your location, even is that a key identifier basically for servicing contracts interstate, your capabilities to do that, your performance, your delivery times, customer service levels, your reputation, measuring results, range, compliance. All these things are factored in as much as the price. You need to think about all of these things as a business and the price. So that's a long checklist, but it's an adherent checklist you should be going with and working with all the time as well. So write it out as a checklist and work through as a checklist and look at where you are in terms of pluses and minuses after the fact. And then you can look at whether, again, go, no go with that particular tender you're looking to apply to. Okay, moving on. So risk management. Quintessentially, I'm saying have a risk management policy, have a risk management process. But risk can be associated with cost, schedule, project management, technical solutions, performance, quality, all of these things. I just want to have an assurance as a tendering agency that you've ticked the box on all of these again. Okay, so I need a risk management matrix or a statement or risk management policy, preferably. Sometimes it's asked for, so you'll be uploading that document as a separate document. But a good company would always have a risk management policy anyway. So make sure you have one, make sure it's up to speed, make sure you're sure it's relevant, and make sure it's purposeful for this particular tender, but not just for your company, but for this particular tender that you're applying for as well. Okay, moving on. Pricing, so determine that pricing strategy, find a way to do it basically, and look at that internally and look at how you've done it in the past, look at what you need to do. So again, competitor analysis there. Consideration should be given to potential customers' budget range and funding profile if known, likely competitor pricing, as I said, your actual costs and profit margins, the objectives to price your tender to win. So you've got to factor in all of these components at the end of the day, including the add-on cost, the ongoing cost, inflation, all of these components if it's a multi-year tender. So make sure you do it. And make sure you don't leave any gaps in that either as well. Basically, it's to your own detriment at the end of the day. You'll be compelled to still deliver for that tender for that price, basically, which is going to be hard. And a lot of companies have struggled to do that, not factoring in project planning or budgetary financial processes that give them a forward planning or forward thinking in terms of the figures they need to actually deliver on the tender. Okay, moving on. Another great quote from a bid reviewer from a number of years ago. We liked your bid because it followed our format and it was easy to understand. The other bidders seemed to make it a treasure hunt to get the information we needed. Again, clear, concise, compelling, short, succinct, and to the point. Answer the question you're asked. Adhere straight to what they're asking, basically. Don't talk around the subject, talk at the subject. Okay, so that means drafting, that means editing, that means proofreading at the end of the day, basically. Don't send me in a merry-go-round or a treasure hunt, as was said here, trying to find the information in your tender bid. And a lot of time we see that. We're getting a lot of superfluous information, people telling us things about their business or the tender bid that we don't even need to know at all. So make sure it's relevant, make sure it's topical, and seek clarification if you're looking for an answer that you really need to provide. Seek clarification in advance before you commit to that answer. Okay, moving on. So ensure you also provide a comment on weakness, and this is always very topical when I bring it up in my workshops and webinars, where people go, in no way, shape or form shall I be perceivably identifying a disadvantage or a weakness in my business. Well, it's not a weakness if you've learned to adapt it and learn to improve it and show you have a process in your business that, things happen and things go wrong, but you're an organization that's a problem solver, as I said earlier on, basically is adaptive and willing to deal with situations that arise, because the one guarantee we can give you in terms of delivering on your tender is that problems will arise. So how are you dealing with them? It's the capability of your organization I'm interested in, the standards, the processes, the policies, the people that you have to deliver on this tender when things go wrong. That's the quality I'm looking for, basically. So it's not a perceived weakness, it's a perceived solution to a problem. So think about that. And that's emphasizing how your past experience and how you're able to turn things around in a time frame, within a budget, and you have the capability and the resources to do that, even with your subcontractors as well. So that's what impresses me, and that's what impresses a lot of tender bid assessors. Think about that. Moving on. So the style you're writing needs to be persuasive. As I said, it's a sales pitch. So it's a mix of business and technical document and the sales document, but it needs to be logical, well organized, factual, informative, concise, and persuasive. And again, you can write down those words as a short list and make sure you're ticking off on them, that by the time you get to your end of drafting your tender, you tick off all those boxes at the end of the day. It makes sense to read, it's understood. It has a quality offering in there. There's a good sales pitch. There's a good price as well at the end of the day, basically. All of these things are important, basically. Okay, moving on. What a tender does for you. I mean, the advantages of tendering, the advantages of sourcing a government contract. Stability, sustainability of contracts, so constant flow of revenue stream coming in there over a period of time. Enhanced saleability, adds value to your business that you've been awarded the contract. You're tried and trusted, someone's invested into you as well, which is an on-sell to other clients potentially as well. And it'll improve business improvement and improve your business process. You'll become a better business because you'll have to deliver on this tender. So you'll learn things out of it, better way to do it, more streamlined, effective processes and procedures in your business to get it done. So there are the three outstanding ones for me in terms of why you should be looking at a tender bid and why you should be applying for a tender. So why not adhere to those and look at the viability for you as a business, that tenders is a viable income stream and you should be looking at it in such a way. Okay, moving on. Assume you're unknown. So again, we talked about brand earlier on, basically. We talked about that you may be known, basically, and then devalue yourself. But also from the other side of the point, maybe it's the first time you've written a tender. So at the end of the day, you need to talk about those things we've talked about already in the slides and in today's webinar, but your capabilities, strengths, and skills are really what you have to get you up there on a pedestal if you're an unknown entity or it's your first tender bid, basically. So it doesn't mean I won't award it to you because you're not a brand. Doesn't mean I won't award it to you because you're not an entity at the end of the day. It's more flavorable, obviously, if I will, because you're a known entity, you have historical value, you've delivered on tenders, you have good price at the end of the day. If you want to compete against that, you're going to have to talk about your capabilities, strengths, and skills as an industry that's maybe not up there or just trying to get there against the market leaders. So you're really going to have to enhance that. Now, that could be a consortium bid to enhance that even further. It could be subcontracting. And again, it could be what I'm talking about in terms of capabilities, strengths, and skills. Think about all of those things. Describe your methodologies and examples in detail. And your business capabilities are appropriate for this job as well, that you're apt, even though you may be in Division 2 or Division 3 per se, in terms of players in the market, that you show your capabilities are right up there and your processes are right up there to promote you very, very fast into Division 1. Okay, moving on. Offer those value adds, very important basically. As I said, the last bullet point, working backwards, it's not necessarily free, all right? It's basically, this may come at a cost and that may be factored in by the tendering agency that I have to pay that cost if I want to get that quality of service and those value adds that need to be there. But consider offering two options, high end and low end, and then multiple combinations between both as well. So if you've got a better idea, as I said earlier on, about how you do this and how you deliver on this project, offer it. and offer that incremental. Yes, you may get knocked out of the ballpark because it goes beyond the bandwidth of what they can pay, but there may be some mitigation and mediation there between you and them as well, basically, if you're shortlisted. So think about those things as well. It is the value of the project. Don't devalue the project or the service that you're offering for the sake of the tendering contract. It costs what it costs. That's it, basically, at the end of the day. Don't devalue it in any way, shape, or form. Okay? Moving on. So, as I said, to reiterate, experience, capability, capacity of your business and company, the service standards and evaluations demonstrated in the tender bid, need and appropriateness of services, basically, that you are the right business in the right time and right place to deliver on this contract moving forward and right now. And the financial and risk management, that basically you have those processes and you adhere to those processes and show me evidence of such, and that basically you can get through this and you're not going to capitulate somewhere through the contract if it's particularly a multi-year contract. All right, moving on. And that's me. So if you have any queries or questions, we were right short, sharp, and succinct today. So I'm happy to take any Q&A that's coming in, Barry, basically any questions in relation to that. But again, just want to reiterate that website to look at it. And they do a lot of information as well. Same with New South Wales, Queensland, and Victorian state government agencies who are based around tenders as well. So please look those up. But that's tenders.gov.au, which is AusTender. And their email is tenders@finance.gov.au as well, basically, if you have any queries around tenders that are presently there as well. Barry.
Thanks, Keith. Thanks for getting through things under an hour for us. I know we had to keep a fair pace up today. We will no doubt have plenty of people referring to this over the course of the coming days and weeks. Just to let everyone know, these sessions last Friday and today are the first sort of delve into the grants and tenders side of things. Keep an eye out. We're going to go into a deep dive on a couple of particular grants that are going to be available to the vast majority of our members in the coming weeks. We're going to literally go question by question, page by page. Here's how to get that grant. And we know where Keith lives up in the Central Coast if we don't. So thanks everyone for coming on. Thanks, Keith, for your assistance as always. And we'll see you all again soon. Thanks.